A very big welcome to you today. I'm Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. Rich, we got to get right straight into the show today. We've got an incredible show, but one of our personal heroes. We often talk about Charles Krauthammer and what an incredible American he is, and the work that he's done in his book that's out right now, 10 weeks on the 10 weeks at number one in the New York Times best-selling list. Things That Matter: 3 Decades of Passions, Pastimes, and Politics.
Well, let me tell you something. There are a lot of people out there that want to know what matters to Charles Krauthammer over 3 decades. Obviously.
And a great 10 weeks on the New York Times bestsellers list. But I really, really enjoy listening to him. And he's got this incredible gift. And we're here in Talk Radio of taking complicated things and putting them into words that we average Americans can understand. A great gift, as we know here in radio, to be able to do that. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome on Made in America, Charles Krauthammer, syndicated columnist, political commentator, and author of Things That Matter: 3 Decades of Passion, Pastimes, and Politics. Charles, welcome to Made in America.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be with you.
Well, I saw some of your commentary on the State of the Union address, and obviously you talk a lot about the political impact of the president's words. But here at Made in America, we advocate for economic freedom, entrepreneurialism, bringing our manufacturers back, and most of all, creating jobs in this country, good-paying jobs. So many people are hurting in this country right now, and they were looking at hope. They were looking for a vision in the president's words. For these people that are out there hoping that a job will come soon, did you see anything in the president's words to give these people hope?
I saw nothing, and the reason is Obama believes, he's been saying this ever since he came to the presidency, that the font, the creator of jobs, is government, and that if you want to get more jobs, you got to do more government. So he talked about these opportunity centers. This is such nonsense. All he has to do is take the foot of the state off the neck of American industry. Keystone Pipeline, thousands of jobs right there. We know, he boasted about how we are now the number one producer of oil and gas. Yeah, despite what the federal government has done. This is all an expansion happening on either state lands or private lands. There's the number of permits for oil exploration on federal lands has been cut in half. So here they are restraining this one fantastic opportunity that we have gotten from the fracking revolution that could create, already we see it in North Dakota, we see it in Texas, in the places where they're developing it on state lands and private lands. They're exploding the jobs. The job opportunities in those places are exploding, and everyone knows that. And rather than spread it around the country, they believe in regulation. Add on to that Obamacare, add on to that financial regulation. And this is killing jobs. This is what they do. They do this for a living. They kill jobs in order to create what they believe is a more just economy, more equality, etc. And we can see the results after 5 years.
It's very interesting that, you used the word chestnuts this week when talking about the State of the Union, that it was a bunch of old chestnuts, which kind of sum it up a little Central Park image for me. But it was but it was the same thing with, sort of like the movie Rain Man, when Tom Cruise says, yeah, but I got the roses. Basically, he got nothing. What did the average person, Charles, take away from this? Because I watched it and I got nothing out of it.
Look, this was... there's a reason that the viewership, if you look at the line connecting the dots of viewership of Obama's 5 State of the Unions, they all nosedive. Every single one, fewer viewers than before. They're tuning Obama out because it was nothing but chestnuts. And we're the squirrels running around the park trying to pick them up, store them for winter. This is the same old stuff he rolls out every year. And they're half serious. They're made to be applause lines, raising the minimum wage, do you think extending unemployment insurance is going to increase employment? I'm not saying that you shouldn't. It's a humane thing to do, although I would do it for the very short term and to build in a wind down. But of course, if you subsidize apples, you get more apples. If you subsidize unemployment, you get more unemployment. Everybody understands that. This is not complicated stuff. And yet they just persist. And then what he did, I mean, the bottom of the barrel was Guantanamo, which he himself has given up on. And then he pretends it's still on the agenda. This is old stuff, warmed over. And if I were a liberal, I'd be very disheartened. I'm a conservative. I'm disheartened on behalf of my country. But as a liberal, he's run out of ideas.
Well, do you think this is why some of the Democrats are bailing right now? I mean, we just heard that today that, Waxman was not running for re-election. Maybe Pelosi won't run for re-election, unless, of course, I'm dreaming. But are all these statements, the flatness, the emptiness of these statements, making people second-guess what's going on? Because certainly his numbers are going down.
I would agree. Look, if you're a Democrat in the House, you're in the minority like Waxman now is after being king of the Hill all those years. They lost the House. They lost it badly, the Democrats. You're spinning your wheels. You're not going to achieve anything. And that's why I think so many are leaving, because unless you're a chairman and you control things, the Republicans, the Democrats know they're not going to regain the House. And they also know, even for those who were in the Senate, you've got others who are leaving, they know that there's no agenda. The next 3 years is just waiting for Hillary.
Yeah. Well, fascinating discussion, Charles, but I'd like to pivot here and get to your book, Three Things That Matter, 3 Decades of Passions, Pastimes, and Politics. What was the genesis of your book?
Well, at a certain time in your life, you decide you got to look back a little bit. And this is now 30 years of my writing. I try to choose the best of my writing that's in the book. And because I waited that long, these 30 years, I think that's been part of the appeal, because in a sense the book is sort of a personal history of the United States. It begins, my career as a journalist began on the day Ronald Reagan was sworn in for the first time. So it stretches through the Reagan years, the Clinton years, of course the post 9/11 years, and now the Obama years. So there's a lot in there. A lot happened. These were times of exceptionally important developments, like the collapse of communism, 9/11, and then with Obama, the advent of what I would consider the most left-wing president possibly in our history, but surely in 80 years. So we've had this great ideological challenge. So I write about that, and there are articles from all of those eras in there. But in the end, they make the case for the conservative argument for limited government, and tries to explain why. Obama's the guy who says if you built it, if you had success, it's not you, it's the government.
Exactly.
I try to show
you didn't
why.
Build that. Exactly. You didn't build that.
Yeah.
Which I thought would have been the death of his campaign when he said that. I was astounded how that worked out eventually.
Well, Republicans have a talent for losing unlosable elections, so you have to concede that on the other side.
So Charles, in your 3 decades of passions,
yes.
what are your passions?
Well, about half of the book is non-political. In fact, I'd intended to do the whole book on non-political stuff, and it's the elegant and the beautiful. I write about. I write about everything from Halley's Comet to Border Collies, chess to baseball. I write about, there's one column called In Defense of the F Word, which happens to be my favorite. I wanted to start.
It's my favorite noun marker. I want you to know that.
You remember Dick Cheney deployed it once on the floor of the Senate, and it became a whole big thing. So I wrote In Defense of Cheney. There's also, I write about the man who said at the TSA, "Don't touch my junk," and he filmed it. So that was more recent. Favorite. So I write about that kind of stuff, the fads and the fashions and the follies, and that's sort of what I find is the fun part of writing. And about half the book is that. But I also did some of the political stuff because I thought it is important, particularly with the kind of challenge Obama has set to the country, ideological, because he is a man of the left, that it's important to include a lot of those arguments. So that's sort of the other half of the book.
Charles, your career in the book Things That Matter spans 3 decades, and certainly, I was in college in the 70s, so I lived that very violently, so to speak, I guess. You had no choice. and particularly the week of Kent State and Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King. I mean, it was an crazy time for us.
Yeah.
And then the 80s was an amazing time. You know, well, go back for a second. In the 70s, we had the first oil problem, and then we had Jimmy Carter, and we went nowhere. We had Nixon. I mean, it was a very exciting time. Out of all the decades, out of all the things that you've covered, all the things that you've lived through, what would you say is this the most exciting now, or is there a time that you reflect and get a bit melancholic and say, all right, God, that was an incredible time. I like that memory.
Well, if I'm looking for the most exhilarating times, it's not now. This is an important time because we're at a crossroads. So the last essay in the book is called Decline is a Choice. And I do think that the course we're on, set by Obama and American liberalism, is for American decline. But we can choose not to decline. There's nothing inevitable. So I think this is a highly important, could be the most important era, but the most exhilarating. To me, there's no question that's the fall of communism. Because if you grew up, as I did, around that time with the 60s and the turmoil of the 70s, I never imagined, and my generation never imagined, that we would ever live to see the end of communism and the end of the Cold War. And for it to have happened in our lifetime without a shot being fired, I think is a miracle of almost biblical proportions. And there are a couple of columns, a couple of essays in the book about that, what it was like to live through that and to realize that this kind of historic event had happened that was almost unimaginable. And, of course, our children live with this as if it's the norm. You know, this is, the idea that communism is a threat to them is some kind of a hoary ancient history. But for us who grew up in the 60s and the 70s, this is a miracle, and to have lived through it. And then, of course, the counterpart on the negative side, of course, is 9/11, which was also something we thought we'd never live to see. So this has been a time of incredibly resonant and difficult, exhilarating, all of that at one time, historical events. And that's sort of what the book's about. It's about the immediate history of those events that I wrote about at the time.
Well, Charles, thanks for your words, and your words that just struck me. Decline is not inevitable, that we can turn this thing around.
Absolutely.
Always an optimist, always an optimist.
Yeah, I am. I do believe America is unique. America is anointed, in a sense, by history, and we just got to get it right. Getting the politics right is what it's all about, and that's what the book's about.
Well, Charles, thanks for being on the show. Charles Krauthammer, he's many things, but he is the author of Things That Matter, 3 Decades of Passions, Pastimes, and Politics. Charles, thanks for being on the show.
It's been a great pleasure, guys.
Coming up, we're going to have Caroline May on, reporter for Daily Caller, going to talk about her latest piece about food stamps in the Farm Bill.